Spider-Man, Spider-Man, does whatever a spider can. Spins the web and dies, catches thieves just like flies. Look out, here comes the Spider-Man. It's the strong, less the bug. He's the radioactive blood. Can he swing from a thread? Take a look overhead. Hey there goes the Spider-Man. At the scene of a crime, like a streak of light, he arrives just in time. Spider-Man, Spider-Man, does whatever a spider can. Spins the web and dies, catches thieves just like flies. Look out, here comes the Spider-Man. It's the strong, less the bug. He's the radioactive blood. Can swing from a thread.
How are we all doing then today? Obviously, first of all, we have to say rest in peace to Mr. Stan Lee, and obviously we have Mr. Crumplepoint here. We'll get into that very soon because it's something that he would be in with very much. He knows him personally, obviously. I'm not doing too well at the minute. Sorry, my head's a bit all over the place. Let me start that again. Hello, everyone. I'm the Common Sense Guide. Welcome to tonight's stream. We are going to be talking about lots of different things. We are with Mr. Crumplepoint. How are you doing, sir?
I'm all right, buddy. How are you?
Not too bad, my friend. Thank you very much. And we are with my good friend, Mr. Ogre. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm all right. I almost thought some Texan took Crumplepoint's mic. He was like, I'm all right, buddy. How you doing?
All right, buddy.
Crumplepoint is a secret CIA agent. I have the documents.
Yeah, I could tell, man. You slipped there for a minute because you must be from like Nagadoshi, Texas. You're like, yeah, how y'all are? Good to see y'all. Anyway, that's a good one. That's funny. Oh, I'm good.
How's everybody actually been? I mean, I know that I did the stream yesterday. I can see that the chat's talking about the two streams in 2 nights, but everybody knows what I'm like. I've got the stamina of a wild horse that just can't get away. But so how have you two been?
Oh, who, me?
Yeah, both of you. How have you two been? It's been a while.
Good. I had a nice dump this morning. I tell you what, the older you get, the more it is that you measure your day by how well you have a BM in the morning. And I got up this morning and I come out here for a minute and it wasn't even 3 minutes. Just it's all done out there. I went in the bathroom. I went in there for 30 seconds. And it's a beautiful way to mark your day. And so I put it on my poo bird. You know, it's a good shit day. But other than that, a lot of news, a lot of other shit too.
Yeah, there's loads of shit today. Loads of fucking shit. What have you been up to, Mr. Crumplepoint? Have you been able to do any more of your comic book, as we'll be talking about one of the greatest creators of most comic books that have ever been created?
Yeah, I've got a couple of new projects that I'm working on, which sounds really vague, but no, I really am working on several new projects, and I'm trying to work out which one I want to stick with, because I want to do a second Peptis, but at the same time, I want to do something completely different. So I've got Peptis 2, I've got a sort of more traditional cape book, and I've got a different kind of, I don't know, it's like a medieval fantasy type thing going on, and I'm just playing with ideas.
You almost have to do another Peptis because of the way the first one ends, in my opinion. You'd think that it would go on from there.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, it'll happen. It just depends which order is all.
Yeah, fair enough.
That's the way it is with creativity anyway. Thinking today about Stan Lee, they were talking about the Marvel method was created by him. You know, he or I guess, I mean, there's a big debate. I see people, someone I was watching another stream today, and this guy would come up right away and he was like, well, how can you call him a genius or anything good because all he did was sign his name to Jack Kirby's work, blah, blah, blah. And I don't even know. I really don't know. I read all the books, all the comics. I was a big fan of the Fantastic Four. Yeah. I had Wolverine 1 through 250. I want to say I had a lot of them, big stack, not in good condition. I read them all. When my wife and I met, that's why she loves me. That's why we're married. I'm not even kidding. I used to read her Thor in Wolverine comic books late into the night. She'd be like, read me another one. And I'd read them to her, make a big deal about it. She would laugh and she'd play some part. It was just fun anyway. But so I don't know who the fuck was really. I seen both their names on a lot of stuff, so I figured they were like both in cahoots or something. But you know how you can start making a lot of money, and it's all off, man. It's all bets are off. You just best friends become enemies, and brothers become haters of one another, and something that was no controversy at all becomes a huge controversy. But ripe old age is the man. That usually also I say this for Stanley. Usually, you know, if you screwed people, now there's some I move on and have done some horrible things, live to be very old. But as a common rule, you know, and he's lived 95, man. That says something about the man. That would be what we call ripe old age.
Yeah, just as well for people that are not 100% sure that he has passed and it's a hoax or something like it was last time. No, this is all over media. It's all over US media. It's all over every form of media at the minute. Daily Mirror. It's all over Facebook. It's all over fucking everywhere.
He's dead. He's gone.
Yeah, unfortunately, he's definitely
died of
passed.
pneumonia.
He's definitely passed, unfortunately. And that's the sad thing. I mean, like everybody said here, even if you don't... Oh, that's the next story. We don't want the next story up just yet. Not just yet. But that's the point of everything that we've just been talking about. I'm still fucking up. Yay, there we go. Boomer Jason's here.
Well,
okay. But, yeah, you've got the story about being able to talk about how you and your partner met. How you and your wife met, rather. I'm sure that there's certain stories that I could give about different things, about how I would play different games and make different friends, and how I used to play with the toys when I was a lot younger and make friends on the estate balcony when you're playing with other guys and wanting to make sure that you could get the Incredible Hulk first. Or there's loads of stuff that you could do that would say, like, this is added to my life, it's added to my childhood. And that's the point of somebody that is maybe not everybody's favorite, but somebody that is Stan Lee, that has been able to, if he didn't create them, has made them slightly better in the idea of moving forward. And whether you like him or not is irrelevant. He's part of your childhood and he's still part and relevant to today. And for people to still be able to do that even to today, it's fucking amazing. Fucking amazing that he's been able to stay there for that length of time and still put in initiative. And remember, still be an active role in the films that are being made as well, as in all the cameos, obviously.
Always had a cameo. Yeah, it'd be a shame because the next one made, Disney will make more. They're going to pimp that some bitch out till that whore falls dead of every STD known to man. But, he won't be in the next one. Maybe they'll Disney him in. They're known for doing, I would say blasphemous shit like that. They're always, because who was it? They holographed Tupac Shakur or someplace. They holographed Michael Jackson. But listen, you fucking weirdos, man. They're dead. Don't do that shit. That's weird to me.
Yeah, I think they pre-recorded years in advance for the next few movies, but they will run out eventually. They did it it'll be 2020, I think. They haven't. But I don't know. The thing with Stan Lee gets a bad rap for some of the creative differences over legitimate creative differences over things like who created Spider-Man and all, like the way Jack Kirby was treated and things like that. But the thing is, like, Stan Lee was an absolute titan when it comes to business acumen and publishing, as well as imagination. He was the leader of Marvel, having created Marvel. It was Timely Comics before. And he changed it to Marvel to make it more marketable. He overhauled the whole line, and he recreated the company according to a new image. And it was his vision. And the thing is, when you're a leader, you delegate. So unfortunately, that means you have to be a bit of a cunt sometimes in regards to, oh, well, yeah, this guy did this, but, it's the company's character now. Yeah. And he put a lot of work in, but it's not fair. Like, this is an argument that's still being had in comics over who owns what and when and for how long and royalties and shit like that. But Stan Lee did an amazing job of curating this talent and coming up with these concepts that he knew people would like, and he knew why they'd like them. And things like, the with great power comes great responsibility. That line, like, that has egged people on to do awesome shit for years and years.
Well, I don't know.
Just what a guy.
I don't know who wrote that, but I'll say this. This is the fact. Hulk Hogan likes to say he's a really, big shot, and he made wrestling.
Yeah.
Look, there'd be no Hulk Hogan without Vince McMahon. His dad didn't have the vision he had. He brought all this together. He made wrestling what it is today, and the uniform almost one, and usually, if you want to consider, maybe 2, 3, and 4 tops. But make a long story short, that's kind of how I look at Stan Lee, because as you spoke, that's what I'm thinking of. Whether or not, because I'm reading this one article and they're like his snappy dialogue, I'm sure he probably wrote exactly what you said. Maybe he didn't. Maybe he just took credit for it. Here's a simple fact. When you are the CEO, when you are the boss, when you do own the company has creative license. They can employ 1,000 writers. What, every writer comes in there and comes up with a He-Man character. Look, I don't want to take too much long because I would on this. This is a question of copyright, and copyright belongs to the people that produce the funds that give that run the engine of creativity. You just sit in your fucking room jacking off, writing, drawing cool characters and making names for them. You ain't doing nothing unless somebody's selling them for you. So anyway, that's that on that. So that's how I look at it. As Jack Kirby is more or less Hulk Hogan. A lot of people are very loyal to him, like Hulk Hogan, too. That's why I brought that up. But Vince McMahon is kind of hated. And then on the other side, you have Stan Lee, who was pretty much the creative genius behind it. They really pushed the shit and got it sold, got it so people knew what it was, like you said. Now, what'd you say the comic was called before? Because before it was Marvel?
It's called Timely Comics. So they had things like the Human Torch and Namor the Submariner, a few others, and all the characters that Marvel's actually fucking known for were conceptualized by Stan Lee. And this is the thing, because people go on about nobody is in any doubt as to Steve Ditko getting the credit he deserves for making Spider-Man. Nobody doubts that. He gets as much credit as he deserves. The problem was money, and I don't think that we should be bearing ill will over shit like that when the industry hadn't caught up with that kind of disagreement at that point. And they're still having that argument today. And the interesting thing about Marvel as opposed to DC is DC started as a big publishing firm, and it was integrated into Time Warner. It never had a head honcho. It's always been a creative team. With Marvel, it took a Stan Lee to make that company survive.
Yeah.
And then he just blew everything up.
Literally.
Yeah, I mean, he just exploded that company. And the thing is, that company was never able to survive Stan Lee leaving because nobody had the wherewithal to realize that they needed to have less of a leader model and more of a team model. And by the time they realized, it was too late, and everybody's still trying to be the next Stan Lee, and nobody's ever managed it. And Marvel suffers constantly as a result. And the thing is that that dude was like the Willy Wonka that actually existed. He was just bringing all this color and imagination to millions of people. And it's like he's not even a national treasure. Everybody in the world fucking knows who Stan Lee, or at least one of his creations, is. It's quite amazing. If you think a young Jewish kid from, I think it was Brooklyn, just in a slum, comes away with him, Jack Kirby, all the first guys at Marvel, and a lot of DC Comics as well, because there was a bit of a swap between them. There was never really the rivalries for selling books. It's not real, and they all like each other. And the accomplishments that these guys have is amazing. But for Stan Lee, I don't think he's overrated. I really do think that he gets the credit he deserves. And the only issue I ever come across is that other people think that other people should have more credit, but they don't think Stan Lee should have less credit usually. And I think even taking the comic stuff aside from it, just the business wise and the way he conducted himself with people, with fans, with colleagues, I think it's a really good role model, for young guys. Because you get people like Ray Kroc, the McDonald's guy. He has interesting strategies you could maybe hope to want to emulate, but you wouldn't want to be like him. Whereas Stan Lee, I think, given the amount of power and money he had, conducted himself very well, despite some of the mistakes he made. They were human mistakes. He wasn't a complete bastard. There have been complete bastards in comics history, and I don't think Stan Lee was one of them. And I think it's a shame his last few years were actually so unhappy. But what a life!
Yeah, he did really well for himself, especially considering that everything that he did up to the point of coming back from the Second World War was just basic, average, and normal. And then when he come back from the Second World War, was able to start his not start his company. It started working for Timely, was able to start working his way up, and then eventually bought it, and then eventually changed the fucking name of it. And that's just amazing, and literally the American dream in itself, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And
I mean, a lot of people with Stanley would always say, as you already said, that sometimes he has too much credit. I don't think that he gets enough credit, because you have to remember, with all of the changes that happened from the 1950s, the golden age, the classic age, the attitude age, and so on and so forth, how all the characters had to change and how all the backstories sometimes change and things like that. Now, I know he wasn't involved in every single fucking story making. I do know that. Most people know that. But to have the foresight to that, the creators of his comic books be able to have that freedom to be able to change it in and around and be that initiative to be able to let that happen shows so much foresight. And no, not Bruce, for all of you English people, but just the actual way of being able to let it happen and just let people have their initiatives. And the way that he always used to talk to people, he was one of those people that you just were drew in by him. Come with me, true believers. It's just the way that he used to draw you in was just amazing. It just seemed like a generally nice guy. He really did. I mean, yeah, he had a lot of personal problems with his own family and whatnot, but mainly his family wanting him to do stuff. But the thing is, he's now unfortunately passed. And the thing is, we need to remember him for what he always has been. And that was the case of giving us such moral characters to live after, of the Spider-Man, of the Avengers and everything else like that, to be able to fight for what you want, be able to fight for what you believe in, and so on and so forth, and teamwork and whatnot. But also as well, the bad guys that he used to help create as well. To remember that there is a bad side of life as well, which he was more than apt of saying. One of his most famous quotes is, "Life is full of challenges," because he knew it always was, and that was the point of comic books, was to say that there is a challenge for you to overcome, but once you overcome it, you can be your own hero. And that's the thing with media in itself, same as music, same as everything else. Comic books, even though they're written, you can have your own form of interpretation of what the underlines of the story can be. And that's just amazing in general that he's been able to do that and help that for that length of time. But that's just me.
yeah, one of his well said, and one of his other quotes was, "People are basically good." And I think that, you can argue the philosophical merits of that all day, but the fact is, if you're writing superheroes, that's a very good fucking attitude to have. And that is where I think the power of the characters he helped develop comes out, because he believed that, really truly believed that. And as you say, he knew people makes mistakes. He knew life is full of challenge and adversity and shitty things happening, but he was always trying to be better, and he wanted everybody else to try and be better, and he wanted his heroes to try and be better. And he did a massive amount for comics, film, storytelling generally. I mean, and everybody has. It's really interesting to see on my Twitter timeline, and you guys, both of you, sharing your stories. It's really amazing when people have that kind of a personal connection with a public figure like that and their works. And yeah, he's some boy.
Definitely agree with that. What about you, Ogre? Do you have anything else to add, or do you want to move on? Or
oh, I'm good. I think we wore out Stan Lee. I'm just sorry he's gone. For me, it's more, I'm pretty narcissistic, so much else I'd talk about, but it's all has nothing to do with him. I just, when these people, now he was old when I was born. He was about 50 years old the day I was born. So in my mind, he's always been old, but it's still marking the end of these eras. And as more of these eras die, and as more of the Tom Pettys die, and the Bowies and these other people die, it reminds me, fuck me, man. I'm just like, I'm on the slippery slope to the damn grave. It's coming. It's definitely coming. Who knows when? But so that's it. I don't want to end on a horrible note, but he did die. He did have a lot of twisting plots in his stories.
Definitely.
It's funny too how, I mean, when we were talking I guess I add one thing very quickly. is that when this stuff first came out, you know, when there was like, for example, Captain America. I mean, there were pulp magazines. There were so many comic book companies. It was unbelievable. And that there's basically now in people's minds too. It is impressive. He had to have either unbelievable luck or he was really good in business. Simple as that.
Yeah, no, I completely not agree. I think the good thing about somebody like Stanley is, I think Crumple Point said it best. Even though with the amount of money and, let's be honest, the empire that he generally helped build and built didn't really change him. He seemed to be the same fun-loving guy that he was back in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s. He didn't seem to really change too much, apart from getting a bit older, apart from not necessarily being as agile as he was when he was walking around and doing whatever. But generally, he was the same guy. He never seemed to change. The money never seemed to change him too much. I think that is what probably his most admirable feat. He never did it for the money. He did it for the stories. He did it for the true believers and his true believers, after all. I think that's the amazing thing about somebody like Stan Lee, that he wasn't doing it for the money. He was able to do it to interact with all the children. Think of how many people in general he's touched, how many generations know who he is, know that his stories and the stories that he helped made and helped articulate and put together throughout the whole of his history and Marvel's history. How many people have read a book? How many people have read his films and watched his films and know what his ideas were? That in itself is just amazing how one person can touch that many people in the world after that many generations as well. In a good way, not in a bad way, in a negative way.
Yeah, not like Jimmy Savile, man. Not like Jim will fix it, touch him.
Yeah, not like good old Jimmy.
Sorry.
Not like him, no.
Oh man.
But
Memes of Destruction says 90s Superman was, 90s Spider-Man, need glasses, is the best. And well, I was shocked at Sam Raimi, man, because it was the Evil Dead, and then he did those. I know nothing's really coming to mind. It seemed to be horror, but Bruce Campbell made all his cameos in those because of Sam Raimi and him. One of the places they shot the Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2. Right up the road here, about 25 miles, a place called West Branch, Michigan. And it's funny because sometimes you'll see like a hand that they're getting away from that's coming out of a cellar, right? You'll see this hand, and then you'll see another angle where you see that from the Evil Dead that's trying to get out. And well, the Evil Dead is in Tennessee and they're in Michigan. That's so crazy. That's the way they cut this shit up, man. A lot of the scenes are like that too. One part of it, and it looks like they're together, but one part of it is in a whole nother state. But I'm sorry I got off of that tangent. I don't know what the fuck. I see that Media Destruction of Evil Dead, and Sam Raimi, he's a genius. He really is good at what he does, if you ask me. I mean, the whole Dr. Octopus maybe fell apart a little bit. He did the Sandman? Who did the Sandman? Was it Sam Raimi?
I have to ask Crumple Point on that one.
Yeah, he did both of those.
He did the Sandman one. Yeah, I wasn't too pleased with that one as much as, especially the first one was good. Anyway, yeah. Sorry, Stan Lee, better you than me, dude. The worms crawl in, then they crawl out, then they play pinochle on your snout. That's how it goes.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Do you have anything to add, Mr. Crumple Point, or should we move on to the next story? Or
just a brief thought that it's interesting when you say that he kind of, that sort of interaction with the fans. Obviously, you can't literally do that. It's a one-way relationship, but the reason it feels so authentically like he was part of all our lives is because that's how he absolutely wanted it to feel. He wanted people to have that feeling when they read his stuff, and I think that's another one of his talents, is that he was so authentic in that regard. That's why it feels so authentic when you read his stuff. But RIP.
No, that's fair enough. Right, I think that we've paid tribute enough to Mr. Stan Lee, and I'm sure all of us here would say rest in peace, and I'm sure all of us feel exactly the same way. What a great man. And with that, let's move on to people that are not so great. Not so great at all. And as it's been for us in England and over the Commonwealth, we've had Armistice Day and Remembrance Day. And for people that don't know, they are actually two separate days. Armistice Day is always celebrated on the 11th of the 11th, and Remembrance Sunday is always the second Sunday of November. One is to obviously remember that armistice, which is obviously to do with World War One. Sunday Remembrance or Remembrance Sunday is to do with every single war after. And obviously today there has been Veterans Day, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Ogre.
Yeah, yeah, yep. And to me, you know, it's everybody went to work today and stuff. This basically was yesterday, like with the rest of the world. For us, I mean, it's on the calendar though. It would be on today.
So
and
if
now
I
people are still, I think the poppies and we do little symbols that we wear, American flags we'll be wearing today. And ours are we're commemorating our veterans back to, you know, when we had to beat the shit out of y'all with a bunch of damn farmers and fucking morons with 10-minute load rifles. We can, you know, we think about all the way back though. You know, we commemorate. I mean, there's people that traditions go back definitely to the War of 1812, where they're going to a grave, where their family members going to a grave to remember them today, or probably yesterday. But yeah, it's sucks, man. Listening to another stream today again, man, and I tell you, just you know, war. It went from something that was always horrible to this mechanical thing now. That, oh my goodness, you know, I was listening.
We always have to remember the human sacrifice, but the reason why I went on to that tangent is to show that everybody all over the world remembers their dead, especially their war heroes and war in general, in a specific way. Now, what would you do if somebody in the United States or anywhere was to say that they wanted to get rid of the racist poppies and lays into veteran charity fundraisers like the Royal British Legion and wants to break them up?
That's fucked up. I got a poppy right here. I'm not even kidding. Nobody says that here in America that I know of. Hell, I don't want to take it off my light, but I got a poppy right here. That's fucked up.
That's completely and utterly fucked up, and I completely and utterly agree with you. This is a journalist called Aaron Bastany, called for the British Legion to be broken up and said poppies are racist.
Racist? That's why racist, common sense. It's in the article. Does he say why it's racist?
I'm sure that he will not elaborate on it. I'm sure that he will not elaborate on it. But there is a video here, and hopefully if it actually loads, we might be able to actually hear it from his own voice himself. We might be able to hear that itself, and once I actually get everything fucking sorted, because you know how I am, guys. You know how it is. I'm a bit of a boomer. I don't really put things up, and my internet's so crap that it just doesn't work very well. So let me just get this all done and sorted. Right, full power. Let's get some heads into that. Let's put this up so everybody can fucking see it. Come on, there we go. So everybody can see it. Let's have a listen to what this cunt has to say. I mean, what this in
he looks like a bit of a fanny, doesn't he?
He does, yes. He's also known as one of Corbyn's attack dogs. So let's listen to what he has to say, shall we?
Invictus Games, get rid of it, close down the Royal British Legion. But I also think the poppy appeal is grotesque. I think it has a kind of a triumphalist militarism to it, which is doesn't really fit with Britain's military position in the world anymore.
It's not a case of fitting with it anymore. It's supposed to be fucking remembering the people that died. The British Legion, the Poppy Appeal, is a charity that actually helps people like help the heroes. It actually helps them. That's the reason why we have poppies and the reason why they sell so well in general and why the British Legion tries to help veterans and homeless people in the middle of the streets, because that's their fucking job. But you know, you would know better. Can't think why you would know better.
Oh man.
It's just like, I mean, it's racist, right? It's white supremacist, I think.
What?
It's racist, it's white supremacist, and the last little bit, which I kind of cut off, I think. So that way he can have plausible deniability because of it. What do you guys think about that?
Well, you got another quote from him right here that says, I think the Poppy Appeal is grotesque. It has a kind of triumphalist maelstrom to it. It's racist. That's white supremacist. So they only played you that one part. You said more. I mean, the guy's trying to wax all eloquent on somebody and make this actual grotesque idea seem to be coming from a virtuous angle when actually, to be honest, this is newspeak, folks. And the young kids, I believe, are eating it up. In fact, a lot of the old kids are eating it up, I'm sure. But that's what you just, we're newspeak. It's making something that is beautiful. The poppies. I think it was you, Common Sense, or the British, or somebody explained to me why it's the poppy. I don't even know why we get the poppy, but there's a reason. There's a specific reason for it.
I can quickly tell you that. It's because of the poem Flanders Fields.
Right, Flanders Fields. Thank you.
Yeah. It's to do with Flanders Field, and because there was so much blood on the battlefield, the only flower that would grow after the battlefield was a poppy. And that's the reason why we have the poppy as the eternal metaphor, signal for being able to remember them, because it's what happened afterwards. It's what we use to remember them.
I should commit that to memory because it is important. But there you go. So why is that white supremacist? It's probably because of who knows. I really don't know, because I'm sure, wasn't it two white people fighting that fight that spilled all that blood? Wasn't it only white folks that died there?
Well, I think that, we were talking about Stan Lee and Spider-Man there, and I think if you imagine the agility of Spider-Man moving from building to building and swinging and dodging, and that's him, and that's how he moves to try and get away from the point, which is the reason we remember the poppy is because of Flanders Fields. We remember everybody that died. We obviously emphasize the British because we're fucking British. But everybody remembers everybody that died because it was a horrifying moment in human history. World War I changed the world forever, irreparably. It will never be the same again. And he's just, like you said, newspeak is the perfect word for it. He's just pulling these terms out of his arse. They're not even original. They're just, he just needs to say, I think things are bad. Like, he could just repeat that over and over again and it would have the same effect. And I think it's a testament to the decorum of the great British public that this man has not been served a much-deserved dry slap around the pus. And I hope nobody does do it, but he does deserve one. And the thing is that, like, if you all you have to do is watch a Remembrance Day ceremony. It's very somber, it's very weighty, and it's very much about let's try and make this not happen again, and let's remember that everything we enjoy about this country was extremely hard won and hard maintained. And we lost a lot doing that. And people like him only get to be arseholes because of that.
When we don't remember, look, Teddy Roosevelt told his boys that he figured, in fact, he wrote in his memoirs, he repented of it a little bit because he lost Quinty. Quinty is what he called him. Quentin was the boy's name. Quentin Roosevelt. He called him Quinty Quee. He was his favorite of his children. Anyway, make a long story short, because I love Teddy Roosevelt. I would always say that I'm an Oyster Bay Republican, not a Hyde Park Democrat. But anyway, so he told his boys, you get up, you go sign up, and you get up close to the battle. Don't try to get some paper pushing job. And I think all of his boys were wounded, and like I said, Quentin died. But he was a nutcase. Well, and we've drifted away from this. This was the norm, people, folks that decided they wanted to serve their country. And now there's this big talk. Well, politicians are rich. They're rich because you pay them to be rich. A senator should not get paid. I'm of the mind that they should have to pay, I don't know, man, at least $15,000, $20,000, at least half of the salary of one of their security detail. And so that's got to be 50 grand. You know what I mean? Something like that. You have to pay that. And you lost your mind. No, well, look at the mayor of the city of London. It costs him something like $1.2 million a year to be mayor, because he buys all his own hats and has to buy a new one every fucking for whatever festival. He's got to maintain the horses, the carriage. He's got to pay the carriage driver. He pays everybody. He pays rent in the place he lives.
Yeah.
But people want it because, and so these, man, I'll go rambling now.
Yeah,
because
that's why I'm going to stop you, mate. Because what I really wanted to do is not necessarily go into the ideas of what war is supposed to be. Forget what the ideas of war is and what war isn't supposed to be. The point of the Poppy Appeal, the point of the British Legion, the point of the Invictus Games is nothing to do with the glorification of fucking war. It has nothing to do with that. It has nothing to do with the imperialism. It has nothing to do with fucking colonialism. It has nothing to do with any of that shit. The point of all of those is to make sure that the veterans are looked after. The point is for Armistice Day that we remember the atrocities that happened on the war, to make sure that we stop going to war. The points of Remembrance Sunday is to make sure that we remember that people died protecting our nation and protecting the world from the big bad actual Nazis. But yet the people that went out to die for us are now being classified as fucking Nazis. Because
sorry,
go on.
That's because this man is a communist. And
yes, he is.
I've been reading I'm not finished it yet, the Gulag Archipelago. It's an extremely enlightening book. And it shows you how these people operate. They don't actually believe in anything. They're in basically a state of mass mental illness, and they're just reciting these mantras. And I mean, like, let's take the emotion out of this a minute and just talk about the sheer stupidity of it, right? He's saying, "Oh, 45 million pounds on poppies, isn't it terrible?" It's like, well, you know what? You're actually barking up the wrong tree there, because see, if you didn't sell the poppies, people would paint them on, they would pick them, they would make them, arts and crafts style and pin them on that way. And then would you still measure how much they'd spent on paint and how much they'd spent on gardening seeds, and then go, oh, that's terrible, they spent 100 million on making things that look like poppies? Would you do that? Well, because people are going to do it one way or another. And the thing is, it's an important lesson.
Sorry, Compound, just 1 second. Remember that he's pointing out that the £45 million that is spent by citizens to a charity out of their own free will. This is not anybody forcing anybody to buy anything through taxes or anything else like that. This is £45 million on average that the British public will pay for poppies. And it's not to feel good. It's actually to help the actual people with British Legion, with Help for Heroes, with all of the people, the blind people, the paraplegics, the people that are disabled and everything else like that, the actual horrors of war, and draw awareness to them as well. But I suppose that doesn't matter because, as you said, he's a communist and doesn't fucking believe in anything.
Yeah, I agree. And I agree with all that, but I think his point is that we spend £45 million on the poppies themselves to have them made and all that sort of shit. And my point is, well, if we were making them homemade, which we would you tally up that price and say that was disgusting? Because it's a ritual. It's a symbol.
Well, if you're spending if he's moaning about the fucking £45 million that's spent on building them, why doesn't he tell us how much that we actually spend on buying them, and see if the buying of them is more or less than what we use to actually make them? Because I can fucking guarantee it that we would actually spend more on buying them than what we would do on making them.
Yep. And he won't have said that for that exact reason. He'll want to conveniently leave that part out. And this whole thing about agitating on behalf of, like, the veterans and the homeless, like, people like this, they come up with these horrible, cynical motivations for things because those are their motivations. It's like when you can spot somebody else doing something wrong before you spot yourself doing it. It's a mechanism, it's a psychological mechanism. So the reason that he sees these cynical motivations of these things is because it's the sort of thing he would do. Doesn't mean it's true.
Yeah. No, I completely and utterly agree. I mean, just so that the chat can understand where we're going through, we're going to have to read a little bit of the story, unfortunately, because otherwise, I know that we've been able to have a little bit through, but we need to let him know that we're not trying to pick or cherry pick phrases or quotations from him or anything else like that, or even trying to gaslight this man at all. So we're going to read through some of his quotes and what's actually been going on. I mean, you even heard it from the fucking horse's mouth himself, but let's just read through this a little bit. And this is a quotation from him as well. When was the last time the Royal British Legion challenged a government on homelessness and public services? Full stop, question mark, joke, full stop. Does that mean that he's saying that they are a joke, or is he saying this is a joke? Now, me personally, I think he's saying they are a joke, personally, from the way that it's written. But he does realise that the Royal British Legion is a charity and it's not a government organisation at all, and is actually chartered by the Royals to actually help out. But I suppose he doesn't know that. So he added that the Legion should be wound up and its assets are given to the homeless, even though the British Legion actually provides help, shelter, and food and coffee or teas to the homeless. But let's just completely broke it up and then give it to people that are generally, and not all, but generally, needing to have drugs and alcohol dependency and things like that. Not all, but some. The thing is with charities like British Legion and others in their ilk, they help the people that want to get help. Not everybody that is homeless wants the help. So to say that we're going to break all of this up and give everybody equal amount of share does not help the people that want the help. It helps the people that don't want it. That's the difference. Does anybody want to jump in on that at all? Or
Yeah, if Ogre's muted, does he want to say anything first?
No, go ahead. I don't have much to say about this guy. To be honest, I don't really want to dignify much he said.
Yeah, that's a good point, and it's probably the less time spent on him, the better. But the thing is that people, I didn't go on social media and I didn't watch TV on the Remembrance Day because I did not want to see people politicizing it. Because anybody who, and it always happens inevitably, and it makes me extremely angry, and there's no point in doing it because the whole point is anybody who is not using their platform on that day to talk about Remembrance Day, and you could talk about other things, but if you're going to approach the subject of Remembrance Day and you're not going to just talk about the loss and remembrance, just don't say anything. Don't politicize it. Don't bring it into a modern parallel. Don't compare it to modern day conflicts. Just don't do that shit. That's not what it's for. You've got 364 days a year to do that. And people who are using this for their own short-term political gain need to have a long, hard word with themselves. And that's why I didn't look at all this stuff. I took 5 minutes to just sit and think about it, looked at a little World War I documentary and didn't think any more of it. And that's all people need to be doing.
That's the thing. I mean, when people say that, oh, the poppy appeal needs to do this, like, we've got 3 colors for fucking poppies now. We've got red, which is the general one, which is actually for civilians, for servicemen and women, and actually for everything that died in World War I, World War II, and all the other wars in general. We now have a white one, which is specifically just for civilians, for all the civilians that died, even though we remember everyone that has died. We then have a purple one, which is to do with animals, so to speak, as in war horses, war dogs, and carrier pigeons, and so on and so forth. Yes, we do. Yes,
You're making that up.
I'm not.
Hang on. Hand to God. And well, you don't believe in God. Hand to whatever. Hand to your family name.
Yeah.
They fucking got a poppy for the animals?
Yeah.
Look, I don't mean no disrespect, but that's fucking crazy to me.
I think it's a little bit crazy. I mean, yes, there are a lot of war horses, especially in First World War, that did get medals, especially for whatever. But I don't think it's the same aspect as a human getting one. But I do think that they do get remembered anyway, because it's the red poppy. It's there to remember everything. Listen, you don't need a specific thing to remember specifically everything if it already has an umbrella term.
A lot of the war horses were consumed by the men. But then, I mean, if you go back in history, war horses were celebrated and grieved over by the men that they carried in cavalries throughout history. So that's enough. I mean, you have a warrior there that lost his horse. He's going to weep. He's going to be sad. And this is a grim man in most cases that doesn't get sad and weep. and then it's going to be over. He'll go on, maybe probably get another horse, and that's enough. I don't know how else to say it. And why would I be so adamant about that? It's because it's a slippery slope. Man, I was going on, and I don't want to ramble. I don't want to say the point I was making before is this, and it has to do with this so poignantly, is that we can't forget. We have to insist that our leaders, if they want to lead us, insist that their children go fight wars if they want there to be a war. If they're pressing and voting for a war and they've got a son 18 to 38, if their son isn't signing up or isn't getting pressured by their parent to sign up, then they suck. Because they're pressuring everybody else that's in the military to go. Their children need to go. Well, in fact, them in cases of they're young enough and fit enough. But carry on. I'm sorry. Yeah. I can't stress that enough though, because we forget how horrible war is. We got Hillary Clinton, man, talking about no-fly zones, and I honestly believe that there would have been something bad go down if Clinton, and it might have been not too bad for the United States, but it would have been a serious slap into the face of a power that you don't want to slap in the face, man, because they won't forget it. And that'd be Russia.
I agree. I do completely agree. I would quickly add to that policy. And I think that and I'm not getting into war in itself. I will come back to this story. But just quickly onto the actual policy aspect, you can quite easily do, and this could be a deterrent rather than it being a threat. But everybody that votes for war, if they have children that are of legal age and are of fit of purpose, should be conscripted. The reason, if they vote yes to the war, so if they have a chance to vote for a war and they vote yes for it, then their children should be conscripted. Because if they vote yes and they believe in the war, then why wouldn't they want their children to fight for their country?
I hate to say it, but I agree with that. That sounds horrible to me. It really does. Because now you're saying we're going to force you to, but that would surely make them think hard before they send everybody else's sons to go get turned into ground beef, wouldn't it?
Exactly.
I mean, and it's so many most wars. That's all it is. Remember that. Smedley Butler. Yeah. Read Smedley Butler, Wars of Racket. It'll take you about 45 minutes if you're any kind of competent reader, and it's worth your read.
Oh yeah, and it's usually free.
Yeah,
it's always free. You can find it.
Yeah, but the good thing is, we understand, and most people here, especially me and Crumple Point and Ogre, obviously, we're not some of the people that are saying, "Oh, war's a good thing. War's a good thing." It's not. We all say it's not, apart from certain circumstances. But generally, we all say it's not. But yet, we still say that we need to remember the brave men, women, animals, dogs, cats, mouses, everybody that's died in a fucking war to be fucking remembered. Why is that so hard? We have this guy, but then we have people that are in fucking parliament. Like in Sheffield, we have a Pacific mayor of Sheffield, which is now nicknamed the first citizen of Sheffield, by the way, because, he has no idea of self-grandizement or anything. But he wore a white poppy. He wore a white poppy, not a red. And that was at an official meeting, at an official ceremony. He did not wear one single red poppy. He wore one white poppy, and that was it.
So he's a commie, huh? Is that why he calls himself citizen first?
I have no idea. I know that he's...
sounds commie to me.
Well, as far as I'm aware, he's a Somalian and he's a person of color, and he's one of the first immigrants to become legalized mayors.
Oh, he's one of those. I'm sorry.
As far as I'm aware, he's so disrespectful that in his official inauguration, if you will, for lack of a better word, was taking pictures of him squatting on tables and statues.
Squatting, like taking a dump?
As in, with his feet on the floor and squat with his knees all the way bent and his ass resting on his feet, as in squatting like that.
But he's not like crapping on it.
No. He's still fully clothed and everything. Okay. But literally, he is standing on. He's standing on tables and on fucking statues for the fact of taking official pictures. That shows you
make a point with it.
That person has for the country in itself, doesn't it?
That's this dude right here that we're looking at. That's the guy that said all this stuff?
No. That is the mayor of Sheffield.
Mayor of Sheffield. Who's this packy looking feller?
This is a gentleman called Abastani. I think he is actually Italian.
Oh, I probably should have said Asian gentleman before anyway. You know what I meant.
Yeah.
I always forget that is actually a slur as bad as the dreaded, Niger word.
Well,
Yeah,
it is
it's a bit of a sore one over here.
Yeah, for over
Yeah.
here.
God blame my tongue because I'll use the Niger word. I'm really not afraid to use any word. I don't like the banning of words, but you know what? We were talking before the stream, Common Sense, and I gave you a little insight to me. I won't share to these fuckers out here. You know, there's certain things I don't like either. You know, this stuff rubs everybody the wrong way. What we were talking about though, this Niger fella. I mean, this guy. What we were talking about, Nigerian fella from Sheffield.
Well, I would just like to quickly say, this guy is a sort of sign of a much more dangerous thing, which is this era or this production line of political extremists. And I don't mean of any particular persuasion. I just mean people who are political extremists and who are a product of all this like manufactured polarization. Because there are some things that you just leave the fuck alone and you keep the politics out of, and this is one of those things.
Yep.
And even if you watch the BBC coverage of it and stuff like that, it is so tame. They will barely comment on anything. They just covered the damn ceremony and they switch the coverage off, and then they go back to the news as normal.
Yeah.
And there are some things you just, for the sake of decency, don't bring your political bullshit into. And this is one of them.
You just don't. T34 tag, here's to you. Thank you very much.
But these people can't view the world any other way. They're incapable.
Well, that's the reason why I wanted to read this, because this is a direct quote from Mr. Bastani again. And it is, we all know about the poppy pill. It's a bit of a joke for people on the left.
Yeah, I'll bet it is.
I think the poppy pill is grotesque. It has a kind of a triumphatism or triumphatism.
Triumphal.
Yeah.
That's a weird word.
Materialism, whatever. You can see what I'm reading.
Militarism. Yeah, he's trying to sound smart.
Yeah, to it. Which the actual poppy pill itself doesn't say about winning the war. There are no songs sung saying we won this war, we won that war. There is no music. There's no dancing. There's no happiness. It's all to remember the dead. There is no militarism about it. It's not to glorify the wars that happened. In actual fact, it's to remind people of how bad wars are by the somber nature of actually remembering all of the dead that actually occurred and happened. So for people to say that just shows that they don't fucking understand what it's about. And as for the fact of saying, oh, it's racist, right? It's white supremacist, even though this year, I don't know what it was like for America, but I'm sure it's similar, that we had people from the Caribbean, because they're part of the Commonwealth. We had people from Pakistan, from India, from other parts of the empire at the time that would have come in and actually have laid their wreaths and were part of the massive amount of ceremony that was there. And yet you're still going to say it's about white nationalism, it's about white supremacy. It just proves that you don't know what the fuck you are talking about and you're politicizing death. But then again, I wouldn't expect anything from the left.
I think that he knows exactly what he's talking about and he's deliberately misrepresenting it. Because you can't interact with it. You can't go down the street and see one of the 80-year-old veterans standing there with his wee box of poppies in his collection bucket and look at that and go, oh, isn't that just a sign of military dominance? It's like, fuck off. Of course it's not. There's nothing about the whole procedure that is anything to do with triumph or victory. And I imagine proceedings would carry on much the same way if we'd lost the war. You know, I know there's political things, you know, like we'd be speaking German, blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? Like, it's not to do with that. It's to do with the deaths.
Yeah.
And not just the deaths, but to actually remember the people that came back and weren't the same as well.
Yeah.
Like you say, it raises money for things and stuff like that. But just the ceremony on its own, it's called Remembrance Day. It's a ritual. And I would also like to argue that the reason we have never had another major war since the Second World War is in fact because people wouldn't stand for it now, because we remind ourselves of things like Remembrance Day every year. I really think that.
Yeah, no, I absolutely, completely, totally agree with you. And you know, this is a politicized point because instead of just talking about, well, it's a militarized ideology that he seems to have that if you do anything to glorify or not even glorify, actually, sorry, let me actually specifically choose the words that I want to choose. Otherwise, I've been misquoted and I would have misspoken. But anything that is to be somber, to be able to remember, to be able to do anything that is beneficial to the veterans themselves, or to remember the dead that has happened, he's completely and utterly against that. To the point where he's against the idea of people that are in the Invictus Games. Now, this just shows me that he does not know what the Invictus Games are. A lot of people would just say, "Oh, it's for people that are disabled." No, it's not just about physical disabilities in the Invictus Games. It's about the mental side of it as well. About the fact that the actual people that take part in it, because they're so used to being in a should we say a structured living center, that they're not so used to civilian life. So they get forms of PTSD just from that, as well as what's already happened to them. And yet he would say that it's done as a PR stunt, even though it's provenly actually helped veterans actually be able to get better and actually have something to fight for and actually be better in general. It just proves the fact that he is just against anything that is to help anybody to do with military, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. It's an attack on every institution systematically, and this is just the latest round in that attack.
Yeah, no, I think that's about it. I'm fucking done with him anyway. The reason why I wanted to pull him up is because that it's not just a case that you have him that is by himself. This is not somebody that is by himself that has singular beliefs. This is something that is actually occurring on a more common level where you actually have people phoning in radio stations. Hey, fuck. You actually have radio presenters on LBC actually coming out and saying that they do think that the poppy is racist. They do think that the poppy is something to do with imperialism and colonialism. They do think this. This is not some crazy person in general. This is becoming a mainstream idea. Now, as I've said before, all three of us are not for military and not for war, but yet you have to give it up to the people that gave their lives for our fucking freedom. Fucking surely.
Yeah, I've had family that went to that's been in war and lost their lives in war. I have two that survived World War II, one of them, and then Vietnam War.
Hmm.
I know. I didn't.
Sorry.
Hmm.
I've had people say as well that it's, they gave our lives for our freedom, their lives for our freedom, blah 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 blah, and
Yeah.
that's not really the case with World War I because it was such a a bloodbath and all that. I'm like, well, that's the point. You don't have to believe anything about these wars. You don't have to believe anything about any of it. You just appreciate what happened. You
Look,
take a moment to it's an exercise. You reflect silently for a minute or more on what happened, and you give some money and wear a fucking poppy and be part of the nation, for God's sake.
I'm not going to comment on World War I or World War II, but the Korean War, Vietnam War, Iraq wars, probably in y'all's case, like the islands there, Falkland Islands, stuff like that. None of it should have happened. I mean, people got.
Yeah, and you remember the dead for that reason. Exactly. That's exactly what.
But what I'm saying is, it just shouldn't have happened. They died for nothing. So my point is this: it's hard to say, and I don't want people to take me the wrong way. I also don't want to take an hour to say it. You go up to a vet, you say, "Thanks for your service." Service to whom? They died for your freedoms. In most cases, not. I think in the United States we have a handful. Last I checked, it's under 100 surviving veterans from World War II. When the last one dies, I don't think we have any vets left that died for my freedom or risked their life for my freedom, because these wars were not for my freedom. They were for.
Again, but that's politicizing the wars, and it's not a case of the politicizing the wars. It's still a case of the people went out and died for you. And yes, maybe you don't believe that it's to do with freedoms, or maybe it isn't to do with any freedoms, but it's still people going out and losing their lives for their country because they believe that they were doing something to help their country. That's the difference, and that's why we, the citizen, need to remember them, because who else is going to go out and fight for us when we need them?
Now, look, if we were fighting for freedom, we would have helped Saddam Hussein with Kuwait. We would have helped him take Kuwait. We wouldn't have fought. And here, let me make it sense to you. Why I'm saying that is, well, when they invaded, a woman could, on the deck of cards that they handed out to our fighting men at the time that had everybody on, the ace of spades, of course, was Saddam Hussein. It went on. Houdet and Qusay were some of the aces. Went on down. They had all the queens were taken up because women held high office. They didn't have to wear no burqa. They could drive. They could do anything a man could do, be educated. You could buy booze there. Hashish was legal in Baghdad. I mean, they were freer than us. Every household could have an AK-47 and a bunch of ammunition. No need to register it. Nobody's going to even ask you about it. That was one of the problems we had.
I know that those wars were illegal. I know those wars were banned.
Okay. I mean, I could make it right. You understand my point anyway. So what's the sense?
I do understand your point, but I'm not going on about the wars. It's not the wars that I have a fucking point on. I don't care about the freedom in this. I care about the person. I care about the soldier. The soldier doesn't have a chance to be able to say, I'm going to fight for this war because I believe in it. I believe in my country. My country tells me I need to do this.
I definitely care about the dialogue, right? Also, yes. It's a dialogue because the absolute outrage with the Iraq war was interesting because the public went.
United Kingdom. So was 80% of the fucking US.
Well, yeah. So there's two aspects. One aspect is the fact that Remembrance Day and Veterans Day are two different things, even though they fell on the same day this year. For Remembrance Day is specifically about World War I and II, and then we remember the soldiers from the wars after that too. But it's specifically about those two wars. Hence the poppy. And then Veterans Day is that's an American thing, and people.
Sorry, actually, Armistice Day is to do with the poppy. Remembrance Sunday is not to do with Armistice Day. It's actually separate.
Yeah, so exactly. So there's yet another separation. But then I think it's a dialogue because what Ogre's saying has some merit in that these wars are usually unjust, right? But the thing is that the soldier doesn't get a chance to decide what wars he's deployed into. In fact, some of them are deployed away from wars that they maybe should be involved in. And the thing is that in order to, it's our job as the voting public to make sure our politicians are not allowed to have these massive wars that kill so many people. So that's what I mean. It's a dialogue. It's a dialogue between the public, the politicians, and the soldiers, because the soldiers shouldn't be being deployed in these unjust wars. It's the public's job to do that. How do we do that? We have these remembrance days, and we remind ourselves that when a politician starts saber rattling, we come down on them like a ton of bricks.
Exactly.
And that's why it's a shared part of the country. It's an institution.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with both of your points. I completely and utterly agree with both of your points. I think most of the wars that we've ever had are completely and utterly unjust. The Falkland Wars, unjust. The Iraq War, unjust. The Afghanistan War, unjust. Syrian conflict, so to speak, proxy war, unjust. I agree with all of those. But I still don't think that we should blame the soldiers for what is going on. It's not the soldiers'
blame the soldiers. I don't believe I did. I would just say, I'm saying this. Encourage a soldier in any way you can. Best thing you can do for most of them is be a friend and be nice to them. And yes, say thanks for your service. But I really, it's so hard for me to say that. I try to find something else. For one, everybody says that. But for another, I don't. They're not serving me. They're serving the banksters. War is a racket. Smedley Butler talks about his time in Panama. Look, they move these people around and use them by saying, you know, Trump's no better than anybody else either. I want to make that point very quickly. All these politicians. Trump talks so much trash about Syria and about how bombing it was stupid. And Barack was a moron for bombing it. Everybody, and then first chance he gets, he bombs Syria. And you were around Common Sense. We were friends. We've been friends a long time. And you know, I'm still not happy about it. And my whole opinion hasn't changed. I realized that I was blind in a lot of ways, man, because of his rhetoric is very convincing. And he is doing good things for our economy. I got to give him that. Boy, oh boy, his foreign policy is not that good. When he puts tariffs on China, they put a statement out right away that said this is an act of war. Now, look, I'm glad that they're coming back now and talking, but that could have caused the war. And that kind of war would have proven my point. It's Smedley Butler's point that war is a racket. They fight, man. They send these kids and they're trained to do this to protect my freedom and your freedom. That's what makes me so upset. That's what raises my ire. They're trained to the point boys, we all know this, but we have to get this in our mind, and that's why these days are great. They're trained that when they see their brother shot and killed, to go. If they tell them to keep going, to go in the face of overwhelming fire, and they'll do it. They'll do it for us every time. They should not be spent casually.
I completely
They
agree.
sounded like I was disparaging the soldier. I'm sorry. It could be taken that way because of what I said. Thanks for your service to whom. I just would rephrase it, and if you get a chance, let them know that you love them, and that even though their government has abandoned them and is trying to tell them that they can't have firearms because they're all messed up now, and they fake shit like this stuff down in California where nobody shot there. Look at the video they released of the shooting. Nobody was there. There's no one there.
Yeah, I agree with your point that you just made, and I also would like to point out as well that it's a funny thing with the thank you for your service thing, because that doesn't happen over here, and two, I know a lot of Americans don't have any disrespect for the military at all, but they find that a very strange, artificial sentiment. That whole thank you for your service thing. Over here, the British public are really quite moderate when it comes to certain things. And my last thought, and this is my last thought on this idiot. I hope he keeps talking. I really hope he does, because every time people like him open their mouths and say shit like this, and then off to the other side, Tommy Robinson's going around meeting squaddies and raising money for them and stuff like that. People see that they're being lied to and they're being manipulated, and these people are fundamentally dishonest. So the more they talk, the better. But I think it's important to have these discussions nonetheless.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. The good thing is that that's the reason why people have fought in different wars and things like that. And in general, this is not trying to draw up anything anymore. This is a case of that's the whole point, to have our freedoms. Now, yeah, that doesn't mean necessarily we have been fighting for our freedoms in general, but that's what we do.
That picture looks like a baboon and an orangutan about ready to kiss. Guess which is which. I'll leave it up to everybody to guess which is which. Which is the baboon and which is the orangutan.
Right, a controversial Labour MP and her convicted drug dealer son are living in social housing despite the pair earning up to 130 grand a year.
Oh,
Shadow Development Secretary Kate Osamore has faced intense criticism after it emerged that she promoted, as in nepotism, her son in the House of Commons job, regardless of his conviction for having £2,500 of Class A drugs with intent to supply at Festival in Dorset last year, as in quite a big musical festival.
2,500 pounds. That's gotta be weed, man. That can't be like Molly or
Class A. No, that would be methamphetamines or ecstasy.
What?
Yeah.
20. Oh, hang on. Now I got okay. Never mind. I got my mind together. It's pounds money, not pounds weight. Carry on. No, I was about to shit myself. Somebody's got 2,500 pounds. It's got over a ton. It got a ton and a quarter of coke or something. Holy shit. That's a lot of weed. I mean, that's like a damn truckload. Anyway,
yeah.
Carry on.
But that's the. Let me carry on just to get so everybody understands what's going on. Now, the Sun on Sunday can reveal that Miss Osamore and her son Ishmael, 29, are living in social housing. For people that don't know, they're in America and whatnot. Social housing, for us at least, is housing that is completely and utterly paid for and provided for by the government or the local council or local establishment.
Yeah, we get it.
Yeah. So in Tottenham, North London, despite their earnings classing them ineligible by council guidelines. In other words, if you earn over a specific amount, I think it's 70 grand, that you are not actually allowed social housing. You have to go and buy or rent. So Haringey Council documents from 2017 stated that households earning in an excess, 64,200 are not eligible to apply for social housing property. And it has been reported that 9,000 people are waiting for social housing in a borough, one of the poorest in Britain, and a further 3,000 are living in temporary accommodation due to the limited supply of properties. And you have this lady and her son both in social housing. Why they're earning together over £130,000 a year.
Damn, that's not bad. That's good money.
It's fucking excellent money, which means that they should be in their own fucking house.
Oh yeah, I mean, if you think about £130,000 a year, that's about $150,000 a year in American money, maybe a little more.
Yeah,
that's you should be fine. You should everything. If you're not fine, you got a serious problem either with something, gambling, drugs. You buy too many cool cars. You got too big a house. Something.
Yeah, you've got some sort of form of dependence.
Yeah, because that's good money. That's living decent. That's living nice.
Yeah, it's not too bad at all. And
I don't want to call it rich now, folks, but I'm saying you're close to not having any worries.
Yeah, but remember that this isn't just some fancy person or some office worker or some broker or some banker. She's representing her fucking area and using her power to get her and her son a fucking house. This is the pure definition of nepotism.
Well, and corruption.
No, this is the pure definition of nepotism.
Because of her son, I understand. Yeah, I get that. But I'm saying that's also she takes advantage, common sense, by living in the flat with him.
Oh yeah, she's definitely corrupt. Well,
yeah,
actually,
that's such a gross abuse of power all around. You know, one would think that that she'd be removed.
The sad thing is the next paragraph. Miss Osmer is a close ally of Jeremy Corbyn and is paid a salary of £77,379 plus expenses, which, correct me if I'm wrong, Crumple Point, isn't that around about into 18 grand a year on top of her salary?
I don't think there's an upper limit.
I'm pretty sure it's between go between 14 and 18 grand a year. I'm pretty sure.
But the thing is, she's shadow cabinet, so the Labour Party, the government, and then the House of Commons can all separately, I think, provide expenses for jobs she's got to do.
It says in the next fucking line, close. I was fucking close considering I'm doing this from fucking memory. Since being elected an MP, she also benefited from £13,000 of travel and accommodation. So, round about, as I said, nowadays probably 15 grand a year on travel.
But that's just her travel. That's not all of her extra.
The expenses, travel and accommodation. But these were to just that she used the expenses for. India and Nigeria that she went to. These were not living for her job. These were her own personal holidays by MP's expenses.
The thing, where does it say it's her personal holidays?
Well, it doesn't need to. Remember, she's an MP for a local area.
No, but this is
2015. In 2015, she was a MP for her local area because she was only first elected in 2015. And this is what's going on. It says benefited from £13,000 in 2015 when she was first elected as an MP on travel and accommodation on visits to countries including India and Nigeria. For her being elected in 2015, she would have no benefits as being a constituent MP with no shadow ministry or anything else like that to go to India or Nigeria to broker any deals. There'd be no reason for her to go there whatsoever.
Well, this is the thing is that they would still. This is the Labour Party that we're talking about, and this is politicians we're talking about. So they still send their development secretaries on trips places, especially to expensive places to waste public money as much as possible.
But you have to remember, she's not a development secretary in this year when she was first elected as an MP. And this is a section from her when she was first elected in 2015, just as an MP, not when she was a part of the shadow cabinet.
Of course, right. I'm with you now.
Yeah, that's all. I just wanted to...
The thing is, I'm going to sound dangerously like I'm defending her, and I'm not. But the problem is that I fear that the son here, because the only thing I despise more than politicians, or as much as politicians, is a journalist. And I think the Sun is trying to make what is a national problem into a party political one. Because the problem here that I see isn't with this woman or the Labour Party. The problem I see is that this is happening with every frickin' MP. Every single one of them, aside from the drug dealing part, obviously that's I'll deal with that separately.
I'm pretty sure that most of the actual MPs, now I'm not saying I know this off the top of my head, but most MPs, and the reason why this is an actual story is because they are not breaking the rules by living in social housing. They actually have their own place, as well as using expenses to have another place in London.
Yeah, the social housing thing, it would depend when she got the house, because it's not, she obviously, this is the thing, they've shown their hand, they're saying she isn't eligible, which means we don't know how long she's had that house. And she's come into some money as an MP, but fucking, I wouldn't be, threatening somebody to move out of their house that they've been in for however long because they've become an MP all of a sudden. And I would rather that MPs lived where they were supposed to live.
It's not because they've come an MP, Mr. Point. It's not because they've come an MP. It's because the threshold for that was what, 64,700 and something? 64,200. If you earn more than that in a household, you're not allowed social housing, regardless of what your job is.
Yeah, if you're applying, you're allowed to earn as much money as you. This is the thing. She's not on housing benefit. That's the other issue. Is she's not on housing benefit. She is just living in a council house. So this is like, I think I have less to say about this story than I thought I would. What pisses me off most about this story is not, in fact, where she lives. What pisses me off about this story is that her scumbag drug dealer's son is now working as a member, not a member, but working in the House of Commons on a salary on the public dime. That is what annoys me about this. I don't particularly care that she lives in a council house and hasn't moved out of it. I mean, I really don't give a shit. It's bordering on. Oh yeah, I'm not telling you not to. I mean,
I'll just quickly explain the reasons why I do. The reason why I do, if she really cared about her constituency and she really cared about the people that are in the constituency, surely she would lead by example and go, well, now I can go and buy a property and maybe I can help people by giving up my social housing and giving up my son's social housing so he can go and get somewhere as well. Surely you would lead by example if you cared about your constituency. The whole point of this story is to prove the double standards of what Labour are. Remember, Labour is supposed to be the people that stand by the people, not for the many, but for the few. Sorry, not for the few, but for the many. Sorry.
No, you were right the first time, trust me.
I know, but I mean, I wanted to do it as correctly as possible for their slogan. But you have to remember that that's what they stand on. That's their principles. This destroys her principles as a Labour supporter. This proves that she is corrupt, as in general, as what Olga said at the beginning, that she would use her power to make sure that she keeps the place that she has, to make sure her son is able to live with her as well, or be with her, or in the same house, or whatever, and still earn way over the threshold for what they're supposed to do for normal people applying for social housing. And yet she's supposed to be able to help the poorest people in her area and actually care about it. Yet she's using expenses to go on holiday at 13 grand for expenses to go to Nigeria and to India. And she's for the people. That's the reason why I have a problem with her in social housing. Not because I wanted to move, but because she's supposed to be an MP that's helping people, because that's the platform that she decided to stand on. And that means she should be judged on her principles because of it.
The problem with that is if she moved out, she would still be a hypocrite, because she would be basically saying, oh, council housing isn't good enough for me now that I've got some money. And I'm not saying you're wrong. I agree with your premise. But the thing is that she, as a public figure, is screwed either way. She doesn't get out of this. Like, she's earning that much money now that it doesn't actually matter which way she goes. She's screwed. And the other thing is that obviously her position won't last long, because I think there's every 3 seconds there's a Corbyn resignation. But the problem I have mainly is that she's hired her son, and this isn't just her. So many MPs. There was some MP who was probably, I think it was actually a Conservative MP, had his wife and his sister on his payroll as like secretaries or something, and it was never proved that they were doing any work. This was back in the heat of the expenses scandal, and that's the part I have a problem with, is people hiring relatives out of nepotism, because the problem is that, you know, he's obviously a drug dealer and can't get another job now, which you could argue either way about the fucking drug legalization as well, but I think that then gets into the long grass a little bit too much.
He didn't just bring fucking what I thought amphetamines and fucking cocaine. He brought fucking ecstasy, cocaine, ketamine, and cannabis. He wasn't fucking around. He had the whole fucking pharmacy there.
Yeah. But,
the whole fucking pharmacy there.
So the thing is, I live in a council house, and I've seen a lot of people who, they get a council house, they do it up, they start earning a bit of money, they look after the house. You know, they've long since passed the threshold for being eligible for a council house, and they stay in the house anyway. And so I see a lot of this, and so I find it difficult to judge, because I can't decide.
Do you think that with the idea of right to buy at this moment in time, which people are allowed to buy their council house, do you not think it would have been beneficial for her to actually buy the social housing then, rather than her staying in a social housing? Why couldn't she buy the house?
Well, that's another issue I was going to bring up, is I don't believe that people should be buying their council houses. I don't like that at all. I think if it's social housing, it should be social housing. And we should either have it or we shouldn't, because the problem is that the person buys their house and then the government doesn't build a replacement house. But they'll plant fucking trees every time somebody uses a fucking toilet paper, but they won't build another council house if somebody buys a council house. So the problem with right to buy is that it just increases the housing shortage. I think I would feel a lot better about this woman, respect for her, if she had indeed moved out of her house and into an apartment, you know, that was of more suiting her income, and had left the council house for somebody who actually fucking needs it. But again, like I say, there's so much hypocrisy on both sides of the House of Commons. There's so much hypocrisy regarding people who support social housing. There's so much hypocrisy regarding public spending. I don't even know where to begin with this one, and I honestly can't render a judgment. I just don't like the fact that she's hired her son, who is clearly some kind of scumbag.
Yeah.
Maybe
he's not a scumbag. Maybe he had to do it for a particular reason or whatnot. And nobody really fucking knows. But the fact is that he's now being paid as chief of her staff at £43,835. And before he decided he was going to quit or resign, he was actually entitled to claim at least $10,000 a year in allowances. So he would have been on roughly £53,000 a year.
Yes, and that's the problem I have with it. And then they use these funds to stand on a platform of division and basically eroding people's... I mean, her whole platform will be, like you say, for the many, not the few. And it's like, I watched that Labour Party conference, and it was nothing but watered down communist bullshit that was like watered down just enough that people could drink it. And it's divisive, and I don't like their message. But at the same time, the Tories do all the same shit. UKIP, you give them half a chance, would probably do the same shit. My problem here is politicians, and I think that the Sun they've reported the truth, but it's like, this is a massive problem in British politics in general, is these spongers.
You're going to have to... I know you're making an exception. For his case, the prosecutor was spared prison... sorry, not the prosecutor. Was spared prison after his barrister was persuade the prosecutors he was willing to make a profit from his £100 haul of drugs. Somebody pulled some fucking strings somewhere along some fucking arse.
Yeah, and this is a doubly distasteful, because we know about all these fucking kids ODing on ecstasy. They were being given ecstasy, they didn't know what it was. They were, you know, that the ones that drank themselves to death. I mean, drank with water, by the way, people. Drank because it destroys something to do with your thymus gland, I think, and you just drink yourself until your kidneys fail. And it's like, that just leaves a bad taste in my mouth. Festival is a big festival, but it's quite tame. Like, it's not like a hardcore. It's not a nutter festival. It's fairly mainstream, and it's just like the guy. I know people go to music festivals to get off their tits and all that sort of shit, but it's not becoming of a public servant, you know. And the fact he resigned, like, the thing is, if my mother all of a sudden became an MP and she was like, you know, I really want you to be my chief of staff. I think you'd be the person for the job. It's good. It's convenient having you live near me. All that sort of stuff. You wouldn't get me to resign.
Mm.
So that it doubly stinks for me, because I would be like, well, you know what? I would, firstly, upon being asked, I'd be keeping the receipts. I wouldn't be spending money like that. I wouldn't be doing anything outside my job, and I'd be making sure that I could be sort of providing evidence I was doing my job, if that makes sense, because I would know how it would look to the general public.
Yeah.
So that when the son or whoever did come along, I have the documents to say, look, I've been doing my fucking job. I've been doing it well, and I know how this looks. So don't you worry. I'm looking after these funds. But the fact that he just fucking resigned tells me he wasn't.
Yeah.
Because if he believed in what he was doing, they wouldn't be able to move him.
Yeah. No, I completely not agree with you. I mean, this story is, I hate the fact that people aren't to be able to get to the places where they want to do, and see it more as a personal outcry to myself that these type of people will use their power, use their positions to get what they need. Now, this isn't just, we're not just going to be pissing all over fucking Labour today. We're actually going to be talking about Conservatives as well. But we do have a very interesting story that I'm absolutely fucking pissed off about. Very, very close to doing a video about this morning. And that is Health Minister considers age tax. That's correct. That's what he actually dubbed it as well. 40s to pay for their social care later and bridge catastrophic funding gap. So what do you think of that? If you're over 40, you got to pay extra.
I think it's an absolute fucking joke aside from anything else. Like, I can't believe this is an actual idea that a member of the House of Commons is attempting to pass off as some kind of sensible policy decision. I think it's a joke. It sounds like something that you would get in The Onion, you know?
It really does sound like something that you would get in The Onion, where, they're actually going to start taxing you because of your age, because you're too old. Now, I don't really like all the isms, but if you're ever going to use the word ageism, this surely has to be in it. This is literally a discriminatory tax. Why is it that if you're going to do it for a social care, why is it that you have to do it from a particular age? Surely you would do it straight away and ring post it purely for social care. Add it to the national insurance. Add it to the national insurance and ring post it for a specific social care program. Surely that would be better rather than discriminating against people purely on age.
The problem, common sense, is that the Conservative Party is actually the New Labour Party. So Conservative is Blairite New Labour, and Labour is Trotsky. So there's not actually a Conservative Party. And now, so they can't admit that the NHS, social care, social housing, etc. are fucked, and that the deficit is too big, and that the borrowing is too high, and that public spending needs to come down. They can't admit all these things. So what they have to do is pretend that they're still doing all these things and come up with something that sounds like a communist might say, i.e. an age tax, something draconian enough that it sounds like the public might stand for it. And that's clearly the way they've gone about making this ridiculous policy. I mean, you're going to get more ill when you're over 40 for a start.
Well, that's the point that I was making, that this is a discriminatory tax. I'm pretty sure that by even our form of constitution, which we don't actually have an actual constitution, by the way, people. When people say we have one, we don't. We have a charter. even by our legal charters, I'm pretty sure that this is actually a discriminatory tax, as in a tax that is discriminating against specific groups of people. And I'm pretty sure that that is supposed to be illegal under our own charter laws. I'm
I
pretty
think it's
sure.
illegal under international law. You can't just say, "Oh, you there, this is your feature being over 45. I am thus going to tax you based on that." I'm pretty sure that it's some kind of crime against, human rights and shit like that. If it's not, it bloody should be. But yeah, they're
Sorry,
trying to. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say that let's put it into this type of a context. For instance, we know what's going on. If people want to read the story is down in the description box. Let's do a little bit of a philosophy argument. You have the conservatives that know that generally people over the age of, I think it's around 36, generally support conservatives more than they would do Labour. But age switches generally, but say for 40, as we said on this, they're literally targeting the people that support them to be able to tax them and think that they're going to get re-elected again. I think this is an amazing campaign strategy. What do you think on that one? Because I think that's what they're doing. Is it? That's what happened in the manifesto for the latest general election that happened in 2016. They put this in the manifesto, didn't they? As in older people to pay a Pacific death tax, it was called at the time.
Yeah, it was the death tax. It was combined with an increase in inheritance tax, but it was basically, you die, you get the money taken off you plus inheritance tax. But firstly, who gives him the fucking right for a start, or anybody else? It's this creeping communism as usual. It's like, oh, he's got more than me, take it off him because he has more than me. It's like, it's not going to do anybody any good. There's no way that the people paying into this scheme will even remotely bridge the funding gap that he has dubbed it. No way. It's an ocean of money. There's no way that it's going to make any difference to the amount of money that the government are getting. But it will make the public feel like those people who could be doing better than them aren't anymore, and that'll make them happy because creeping communism. And the thing is that this idea that the over 45s are somehow doing better than anybody else is like, it's based on the premise that the over 45s actually have any fucking jobs or whatever. I mean, all the factories are shutting down.
Sure.
They're laying off public servants all the time. Are the over 45s actually making any more money than anyone else? I would highly doubt it.
But that's the point that I was trying to make, that it seems like the Conservatives don't want to lead anymore. They're devising policies that seem to be pushing people away. Like, generally, the Conservatives, like the UKIP voters and the Conservatives and even parts of Lib Dems who flip-flop between the three parties, for instance, would generally vote Conservative if the policies meet their matches, so to speak. But the policies are no longer meeting the Conservative matches. So all they're doing is pushing their base and trying to nick Labour supporters and thinking that they're going to keep their base. This is why I think that if UKIP were able to get more people in more areas, they would win more seats. Because even they're more of a liberal party or more of a libertarian party, they have conservative values. And I think the main core of Conservatives would vote UKIP once realising they're not the racist party. I think that would generally happen because, as you quite rightly said, we now technically have the Conservatives that are now New Labour, that are centre, that are now pushing for more taxes, which the Conservatives hardly ever would have pushed for more taxes. They would have pushed for more enterprise, more self-ownership, more self-responsibility, not more taxes. That's the Labour policies.
The thing with that we need to remind ourselves of when we're talking about the parties is that the electorate is shrinking all the time. It's only like a third of the country that actually ever fucking votes now.
Yeah, right about.
Sorry?
Yeah, roundabout. It's roundabout. I think it's around 58 to 66% on most general elections.
Yeah, I've made the argument before that without a 51% voter turnout, the government should be considered illegitimate and the Queen shouldn't allow it. I mean, I know that's a fucking controversial statement, but it's like, other than it, like, if I know that these things are a continuum and nothing exists in a vacuum, but if you've got 30% of the population voting, and of that 30%, half get the government of their choice, so like that means what, 14% of the population are deciding the fate of the rest of the population, which is alarming to say the least. That's not democracy in action, and it's not the government's choice to say, oh, well, you didn't vote, so you don't get a say. It's like, me not participating in your stupid game doesn't mean that you get to then force me to play the game nonetheless. You know what I'm saying? So it troubles me because they're fighting.
I would quickly add, though, that if you don't vote, you can't really dictate. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to say that if then you're an idiot or you can't talk about politics. I'm not saying that, but the only way to change the of what you think should be in place is by voting for it and convincing others thereof to change it. Nothing else.
Yeah, I realize that I'm making a bit of a metaphor, not metaphor. It's a hypothetical rather than a practical point.
Yeah.
But it's I think it's a question of legitimacy. And the thing is, if you were to just get some random gang and muster up more democratic support for that gang, do they then get to become the government? Like, I don't mean the leading party. I mean, do they get to just replace the House of Commons? Because they would have a larger voter turnout for the gangs, right? So it's a question of legitimacy in that regard. So anyway, hypothetical point aside, we've got about 15% of the population deciding the fate of the entire country, and that 15% get their way, which means the remaining 15% to make 30 are pissed off, and the remaining 70% of the population who didn't give a shit in the first place are still pissed off, and the number just shrinks and shrinks and shrinks. So both parties are getting more and more desperate, and it's like, what's going to happen is they're basically going to get to the stage where they're fighting for the votes between a set of people who are actually unanimous. You know, like, it'll only be the people who all agree with each other that even turn out to vote, unless something radical happens. And UKIP have said before, all they need to do is mobilize, like, well, you know, a 15% section of the population that doesn't vote, which they did. That's how they got what was it, 5 million votes that they got before? That's how they did it. They got non-voters to start voting again.
Yeah, they were the third biggest party back in 2013 by votes alone.
Yeah, so I've taken a very long time to say that's why all these parties sound the same, because they're actually appealing to the exact same people every year.
No, completely, I agree. Do you have anything else to say about this? Because I don't really have too much to say apart from the Conservatives are turning to the left. The Conservatives are actually destroying the country in itself and are pandering to a certain subsect of people in general. And yet they still can't fucking organise a piss up in a brewery. And yet they are the better option out of the two.
Yeah, I think that they're basically committing suicide, whether it's on purpose or not.
I think it's on purpose. I don't think they want to win the general election. I don't think they want to go through with Brexit. And the more that they push the ideas of having bad polls, the more that people will push for the idea of not doing anything. I mean, literally, the next story is people saying that Theresa May has 48 hours left in government. And if she doesn't get her deals pushed through, then people are going to push her out, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, with the shrink, like you said about not wanting to be in power, we've got a case where the political class is now, they have finally realised how fucking inept they are and how much the public hates them. But instead of rising to the challenge and actually doing their job, they are now running. They are running for the hills. Like, I wouldn't actually be in disbelief if what you said is true about the Tories actually sabotaging their own plans and then hopefully imploding their own party and reorganising themselves and making themselves more palatable in 4 years. I really wouldn't be surprised. The problem is that Labour don't want to lead either because nobody wants to be in charge of Brexit and nobody wants to be in charge of the deficit.
Jeremy Corbyn would be. It's the only thing that I fucking trust him on. Believe it or not.
I don't, because he said he wanted out of Europe for years.
Exactly. That's why I would trust him on it. He's the only person I would actually trust him because he would be so fucking cunning and naive and lead his party down the garden path. They go, oh, look, I'm going to do this still. Oh, sorry, guys. This is what happened. Brexit.
That would be nice, but unfortunately, I don't think it will happen. But no, it's interesting. I think that we're in, like, I don't think a revolution will happen in the traditional sense of the word, but I think we're entering revolutionary territory here because the political class is now running from the electorate. I think what will realistically happen is another party will take the lead, but
I don't.
It just needs somebody to point out, and this is where the media becomes an obstacle. It just takes somebody to point out the fact that the public and the politicians are at odds. The public and the public shouldn't be fighting amongst themselves. We should all be going after the political class.
I kind of agree with you on that, but I do think that most of the public that are, should we say, on the right in general, right of centre, not to quote any Nazis or anything else like that, but right of centre people, they're generally angry about what they see. Like, that's the reason why people are moving further and further to the right in general from our own Overton window, because it's splitting. There's no centre anymore. There's no people that are able to have conversations because they are being polarized, because what they see is destroying and pulling them further and further away. And the more that you have division like that, and you have leadership like we do, which is not doing anything to pull people together, all it is polarizing people, and is in the media calling people Nazis and whatever. Now, I'm not saying there isn't any Nazis. There definitely fucking is. But that doesn't mean that everybody that talks about immigration is. That doesn't mean that everybody that talks about Islam is. That doesn't mean that everybody that talks about the idea of Brexit is. It doesn't mean any of those. But yet, because the media is now pushing that, you now have a divide that's straight down the middle. In actual fact, you even have it on Twitter where you have Ramonas and the Leavers. What about all the people that were Remainers that have now come out and actually said, no, we would actually vote Leave because everybody's fucking up now? And we can see that the government's dragging its feet, the European Union is fucking us over and everything else like that. You don't hear about them because you need the polarization. Because if you don't make the polarization, you don't cause a division. If you don't cause a division, then you lose the focus on what you're actually fighting against.
Yep, absolutely agreed.
And personally, I actually think that it's because people are so angry and because they're getting people like Tommy Robinson actually out there, for instance. And no, I don't think he's a racist at all. But you get people like Tommy Robinson out there that are doing what they're doing and pointing out what the government's ineptitude is, where you have this government that is not talking about rape gangs and whatnot and everything else like that. But now that they have started to with Savage Javid and all that sort of stuff, they're still hiding it. They're still not saying what has gone on, what hasn't gone on, how we're dealing with it. They're doing trials behind closed doors. They're not doing a very wide coverage of it. But it goes even deeper than that. With the Asia Bibi story from Pakistan that was done for blasphemy, where she was going to be condemned to death because of it, and only international pressure stopped this from happening. So don't get me wrong, there's still tons of people that are in Pakistan that are in the same blasphemy laws and still have the same aspects of what's going to happen to them. It's only because of international pressure that this has happened. But yet, our government is so scared about a peaceful minority of people, apparently, that they are so worried about bringing this one woman in, regardless of her religion, regardless of her race, are so worried about bringing her in to be able to be safe so she's not killed in her own country, that they would condemn her to death in her own country rather than suffering some pushback from a peaceful sect of people. And people are looking at that, and people are seeing that this is not a government that has any sort of form of leadership, that isn't for the English people anymore, that is for somebody else. for themselves, maybe. I don't know. Well, I don't know what money they're getting out of it or anything else like that, or what use they're getting. But something's happening where the paradigm of the government is not to look after its citizens; it's to pander to make sure that they don't rock the boat anymore. As far as I remember, governments weren't there to pander to the people. They were there to not dictate to us, but enforce the laws that people have been elected to actually do, rather than dictate what the public want.
Well, yeah, and the other thing is that the reason that the political class are also opposed to Brexit is because of what you just said. They know it. They're a political class. They make money for their masters or themselves in the Commons, whatever they may be, know they're going to be incredibly unpopular and never get elected again, and then they go to Brussels and then they get basically a blank check for the rest of their life because,
Sounds like
job
Tony
well done.
Blair. Sounds like Tony Blair, that one.
Well, yeah, but that seems to be the business model. I mean, look at what is it?
Angela Merkel, she's got a job at the end of her 2022 career, hasn't she?
Oh, Jesus, that as well. But I was thinking of like people like Nigel Lawson and Lord Heseltine. They make these woeful
the grants that they fucking get from the European Union.
yeah, they make these woeful calls as politicians, knowing that they're going to be absolutely destroyed by the electorate. But they do it in the full knowledge that all they have to do is make enough money for certain people so that they can get out and go to work for the EU, and that's why they're so terrified of Brexit.
Yeah, no, completely not agree. Completely not agree. I'm not actually going to do the last couple of stories because I'm not feeling very well, to be fair with you. I'm not feeling very well at all. I've got a little bit of headaches, to be fair. I'm going to leave this last... I can't think at the minute. Last appeal, so to speak, for my hospital treatment and whatnot. But I'm going to probably... What is the time anyway? Well,
just after 10.
Yeah, it's coming up to 2 hours anyway. So I've done a half decent stream with the beginning bit and that, and had all right. For anybody that doesn't know, and the reason why I've been pushing and why Crumplepoint himself as well, thank God, has been pushing my PayPal and that, is because I'm going to a hospital to have an operation very soon, which is called a gastric bypass. But this is not just because that I'm too fat to fucking exercise. I'm also disabled. I have fibromyalgia, as well as lower disc problems. I also have arthritic symptoms all over my body, thanks to the fact of the fibromyalgia and so on and so forth. I do have videos on what my symptoms are and everything else like that, so you can go and have a look at them if you would like to. But because of all of that, I have to have this done. And because I am disabled, I don't really have too much in the way of being able to look after myself and look after what's going on, and especially while I'm recuperating and everything else like that. I can't do anything. I can't go out. I've got to literally lie down for around about 2 to 3 weeks before I can start moving around and start doing actual exercises and everything. So, yeah, if anybody would like to help me, then please do. I'm not asking for fucking millions or anything else like that. Just a little bit will help, even if it's £1. Anything will bloody help me. And for all the people that have done already and donated, thank you very much. I really do appreciate it, but I do need a little bit of help. And you, people that are here regularly know that I don't do this regularly. I don't do this at all. But this is a kind of I need to. So yeah. So if anybody wants to, there's the bit in the chat and there's a bit in the description box below. That's my PayPal. If you do feel like you want to, then please do. If you don't, then that's fair enough. I understand. With that, I'm quite happy to end the stream here, but we've got our last and final words. I know that Ogre's not with us at this moment in time. Unfortunately, he had to get off. But Crumplepoint, sir, I believe that you're up with your final words. It can be anything about today.
Awesome, thank you. I guess, well, firstly, I'd say that Common Sense's videos are excellent, and if you want to incentivize him to do more of them, which I think you should, and the live streams, then you should definitely donate to his PayPal. He isn't the sort to shill it very often, which is exactly why he needs to shill it just now, because he doesn't shill it often enough. But if you get some of the absolute tripe on the internet that people will give money to. Whereas this is kind of important. This is a self-improvement exercise, and it's so that he can shed the excess weight from not being able to move around and maintain a healthy weight. And I think that's he's already been exercising as well, as much as his body will allow. So it's not like he's made the commitment. This is just to speed things up. Now, with that said, in regards to the show, I think that a lot of what we've been talking about, the theme running through these stories tonight, seems to be the fact that our political and national institutions are kind of a dynamic thing. It's like a continuum, and each of them is almost in conversation with each other. Kind of like with the MP lady, we need to have trust not just in her, but in the institution of MP, in the institution of the Commons. We need to have trust in the the armed forces, in the politicians that send the armed forces around, in each other as citizens. And that's why Remembrance Day is so important, because it's a reminder to.
You've stopped talking, by the way. The sound's completely gone from your microphone. I'm guessing that it's because you've roboted. So if you want to take it back.
Oh, hello?
Yeah, I can hear. It's just that it's roboted and kind of cut out.
Yeah, just taking part in these exercises and taking an interest in what's going on nationally is important. We live in a democracy, whatever you think of that, and to keep it healthy, we need to treat all these institutions like they're alive almost, and keep them healthy, keep speaking to each other, keep them working with each other, and keep them counterbalancing each other. And we need to be able to trust each other and these institutions. And so take a moment to sit and maybe think about what makes whatever country you're currently living in, what makes it that country, why it's important, and give thanks for what it is and think about what could be improved by it. And remember that these things are kind of dynamic, they're moving all the time, and so use that. These things can be changed, and it's media exposure generally that changes these things. So thank you to the Common Sense guy for having me on. Please consider donating to his PayPal, and I will see you guys sometime soon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Crumplepoint. Very eloquent as always, apart from the end, but we won't hold that against you. What I really wanted to say was that I'm going to be talking about the idea of the war and everything else like that that's been happening. And by that, you can take that into any sort of idea or ideological standpoint that you want to go from. What I wanted to say was, you have instances where you have people on the left that want to go, well, this is racist, this is racist, this is white supremacist, this is bad, we should abolish this, we should abolish that. But when you ask them about their policies and how their policies are going to change, they don't have an answer. They just want to abolish what's already there and say that it's for the greater good. And they don't give you the actual definition of what the greater good is. All it is that it offends them and their sensibilities. To the point where you would have, as we did for one of the first stories today, you have the point of the red poppy, as in the fact that it is now in some leftist circles classified as a racist, imperialistic, colonialistic symbology, even though it has nothing to do with the empire whatsoever. It has nothing to do with the actual wars in itself either. It's to do with the remembrance of the people that were in the war. But this turn of phrase, this turn of doctrine that is now coming around, where people are trying to change history into their own ideas and their own faction of what is very, very disturbing. Because if you can change what the past is, you can control the future. So if you can say that the poppy is fascist, or if you can say that the poppy is racist or white supremacist or whatever, or any other symbology or every other ideology, if you can change that from a historical standpoint, it then gets taught that way. And history is a lie that is agreed upon. So history can change. It doesn't matter if for 100 years that we all believe that the earth was flat, for instance, which I do not. But it doesn't matter if that happens. It matters if it all changes and people then go, well, now it's changed. I use that for a particular point because everybody solidly believed in that for such a long time that when evidence and everything else come out that it was that way, then we changed our ways on it. Now, that's the same thing that can be done in a political standpoint. And by the way, again, just to realify, I do not believe that the Earth is flat. It is a globe and we spin around in a fucking solar system and the solar system's fucking moving. But besides that, it's a case that if you can do that for that aspect and change evidence and change preferences and everything else like that, why can't you do that from a political standpoint or from winning a war? And a war doesn't have to be a physical interaction. It can be a psychological interaction. It can be a point of a philosophical interaction where the philosophy changes. And that's where we are at this minute in time. Now, I'm not good saying go out, change everything and whatnot. But the left are changing what words and definitions are. They're changing the ideas of what war is and what white supremacy is, what nationalism is, what this and what that is. To the point where I was actually speaking to somebody on Twitter where they said that nationalism is bad, but patriotism is good. You can't have patriotism without nationalism. It can't happen. You have to have a form of an identity and an ideology and you have to have some form of land that you fight for. You can't have patriotism without a nationalization or a nationalized identity. It doesn't work. And that's the point of today's stories. People are changing the definition of words and people are not picking up on it. That's the scary thing. That's what's worrying. It's not the fact that people are coming out and saying that this is bad and this is good or whatever. That's part of discourse. That's the way that people have different opinions, and that's a good thing. But it's bad when you change the definitions and those definitions get picked up by the general public. That means the lexicon gets changed by societal changes and not by dictionary changes. And the lexicon can change by societal changes instead. And that's where we shouldn't be going, but we are, because the left can't beat you on facts. So it has to change what it means to be able to get you to change what you think. And that's all that this is. This isn't a war against people physically. It's a psychological war. And that's what we have to fight with. But I've rambled on for a little bit there. So with that being said, guys, thank you very much for watching this. Thank you very much for Roga. Thank you very much to Crumple Point. Thank you for everybody that's been watching this and donated and done whatever they can to help me in any way whatsoever. Thank you, guys. Speak to you again real soon.